Captain Penny's boat came. We all jumped in it. It danced on the waves. We went over the bay fast enough, and then we got over onto the barrier beach. We all jumped off the boat. We bounded over the long grass towards the scene, and we could see the tall mast beckoning them onward over the beach hills. Once we reached the beach hills, there lay the wreck below them. The huge hull of the Argo was stranded. Her tall mast reached towards the clouds. Here and there, the sails were flapping in the moaning wind. Shrouds rattling, whistling. The loosened rudder pounding in the surf. And the sailors were trying to get off the rest of the cargo, and they were singing as they were doing so. The white gulls were perching on the spars and mocking the people as they were trying to get the cargo off. The great vessel had tumbled
Please call the office.
And throbbed under gigantic blows of the sea. Now, this ship was a French ship. Along the beach lay clothing, luggage drying in the sun. Boxes, bundles, beds, pillows, everything. The people sitting in their trunks were huddled together because it was March and they were cold and they were wet. They were trying to shelter themselves. They had built a big bonfire made out of driftwood. They had a parrot. They brought a parrot ashore. The noisy parrot was in a cage, gave a hopeful expression to the scene. He was the last live thing on board, and the sailors had brought him over. Everyone was rather cheery for a terrible day. The dry land was a comfort because they thought they were going to get stranded on the ship. They didn't want to lose their lives in the water. The spars, the rigging, the iron bolts, the sails, the lifeboats, the gangplanks lay scattered all over the place. Tents were made of beach sails on the hills. Captain Crawford gave all the landspeople, the Floyds, a hearty welcome. He was very sad because he thought he was going to get in trouble because he stranded his ship on the beach, and it was a very fine, fine ship. The family dined with the captain in his tent. They stayed till nightfall. Then they went home, satisfied that the Argo was there to stay. It was stuck on the beach, and they couldn't get the ship off. The noble ship bore courageously the buffetings of storms and tide for 1 full year. So that ship was on the beach for 1 full year. 12 moons had risen and set. That's 1 year. In the shimmering sea, her shadow was thrown on the sands below. She finally floated off into the water and they used her for 10 more years afterwards. Now, another ship came ashore, very close to the Argo, and this is a famous ship. It's called the Franklin. That one's documented. In 1850, the Franklin wrecked, and that ship was pounded into pieces, but the Argo was not. The Argo stayed there. The dear old Argo, how can I describe the fun afforded all the children that summer when she lay stranded on the beach? At low tide, they clambered up the side of the Argo. They ran through the chambers like rats in a hayloft, making good friends with the first officer, who was left to be in charge of the boat. He always welcomed visitors because he was lonely. He had the whole boat to himself. The first cabin, the captain's room, the second cabin were all familiar haunts, and the children visited them daily. They ate their lunch in the grand dining saloon with the tables sideways. The giddiness drove them back to the deck. They peered out the portholes. They fancied themselves sailing away on the ocean. They sat in the staterooms, imagining they were first-class passengers. They went up to the wheel room. They chatted with the first mate. They listened to sea stories. They learned the names of all the ropes. They scampered over the deck with all the emotions of the first passage at sea. Sitting by the driftwood fires in the nighttime and moonlight, the children made dreams about the Argo and sailing away. When she slid from the strong grasp that had chained her on the beach for a whole year, they parted with her as with a friend, and they felt a great joy vanishing from their young lives forever, and they recalled her many a time afterwards as they sang sea shanties. So that's just one story. Now you can imagine going down to Smith Point and seeing a big old-fashioned stranded ship there. And if it was abandoned, you might scamper up on it and go through all the rooms and play on it. And that's what the kids did a whole year. So there's actually pictures of the Argo. Some of the Floyd kids drew pictures of it, so we know what it looked like. And here's a story about it. So that's one way the kids would entertain themselves. Now, let me read you one other story before I go. And do any of you have any questions? Any specific questions? Yes?
How did William Floyd die?
He died as an old man. He just died from old age. So he was lucky that he had such a long life for those days, because people would die early sometimes in the old days, because they didn't have medicines like we have today. Sometimes people would die from common cold or measles or things like that. So today we have medicines for that. In the old days they didn't. Yes?
During the war, why did his wife die?
Oh, the Revolutionary War? We don't know. We don't know why William Floyd's wife died. And she's buried in Connecticut. William Floyd didn't live at the Floyd estate during the war.
He flew to Connecticut.
That's right, because why? Why, if the British captured William Floyd during the Revolutionary War, what would they have done to him? Yes? Young man? Yes.
They might have killed him.
That's right, because to sign the Declaration of Independence is treason to the King of England. So they would have hung him, because that was an offense that you would have gotten hung for in the old days. So he didn't live at the Floyd estate. He wanted to keep his head. So he moved to Connecticut during the war, and he went up there with his family. And during the war, his wife died. But we have no information as to why she died, but that's where she's buried. When he came back here after the Revolution, he remarried. He got married again, and he had more children by his second wife.
Did he have three marriages?
No, he only had 2 marriages. He had 3 kids by his first wife, and after she died, then he married again, and he had 2 more children by his second wife. His son had 8 kids. William Floyd himself, he was born in the house. He was one of 9 kids born in the house. So in the old days, everybody was usually born at home, and usually died at home too. All righty. Before there was a railroad, you know how you used to get to Mastic? Well, if you were coming from New York City, if you were a visitor coming from New York City, how do you think you would get out to Mastic? Yes?
Walking?
It's a long walk. That'd take you a long time. How would you get out to Mastic from New York City?
Boat.
Yeah, probably by boat. Boat was the fastest. Remember, New York City's way down here. You come along here, there were inlets through Fire Island in the old days, so it was actually quicker. You can get to New York in the course of a day by a boat. So you would come through the inlets and you'd sail right over to the lower part of the Floyd estate. The Floyds had their own docks, so yes, you could get there by boat. But a common way to go was a little bit different. It was before the railroad. What are those old-fashioned carriages they used to have? Well, what would we call them? You've seen them in the movies. Yes? Go ahead.
A cow.
No, not a cab. Yes. Taxi cab.
Horse and buggy.
Yes, good. It's a carriage. Stagecoach. There were stagecoach routes. All the ways from Brooklyn, all the ways through to near Mastic. Actually, the stagecoach in the old days didn't even come to Mastic. It used to stop in Patchogue. Patchogue is about, what, 8, maybe 10 miles away. So this is a story about coming from New York, written by Sadie. Before Sadie was 6 years old, she had a dreary ride with her mother and her little baby brother, all the ways from the city to Patchogue in a crowded stagecoach. And you all know what stagecoaches look like, you know, with horses. Grinding, grinding went the wheels in the deep sand. The flies and the mosquitoes were buzzing and biting them. That's something we can all relate to today. And the scrub oaks were striking the spokes of the wheels. The passengers were grumbling. The driver urged the tired horses. The air was hot and the hours were long and tiresome.